Decked by Fortune, a Batman all media types fanfic, rated for general audiences, with additional tags for Christmas, brotherly love, Dick Grayson is Nightwing, good sibling Dick Grayson, Dick Grayson is a ray of sunshine, Jason Todd is Red Hood, Jason Todd centric, good sibling Jason Todd, resurrected Jason Todd loves Roy Harper, Tim Drake is Robin, good sibling Tim Drake, Barbara Gordon is Oracle, Barbara Gordon in a wheelchair, Alfred Pennyworth is the best, good grandparent Alfred Pennyworth is so done, awesome Alfred Pennyworth, Crack, and Crack treated seriously. Part 10 in The Robin Chronicles. Summary. Come on, Little Wing. This'll be fun. And it's for the alley kids, remember? That has nothing to do with the fucking fact that you want me to wear this bullshit. Jason snapped back, lifting the gaudy Santa Claus costume out of its plastic packaging, like it might bite him. Or, the boys dress up for the library's annual Christmas event. You're as cuddly as a cactus. You're as charming as an eel. You're the mean one, Mr. Grinch. Thurl Ravenscroft. Jason was starting to regret ever promising Barbara, alongside his brothers, that he would help out with the library's annual Christmas gathering. When he'd agreed to play a part in the festivities, he'd envisioned himself reading stories to kids or handing out hot chocolate. But no. Of course, that wasn't what Babs had in mind. As Dick went on yet another triad in an effort to motivate him, Jason rolled his eyes, scoffing. Come on, Little Wing. This'll be fun. And it's for the alley kids, remember? That has nothing to do with the fucking fact that you want me to wear this bullshit. Jason snapped back, lifting the gaudy Santa Claus costume out of its plastic packaging, like it might bite him. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught Tim trying, and failing, not to laugh. The second Jason shot him a sharp look, the snickers evaporated, replaced with a wide-eyed, deer-in-the-headlights expression. Come on, Jay. Tim and I will be your elves. This is going to be so fun. Dick practically bounced off the walls like a caffeinated child. Jason dropped the horrendous costume back on the table, glaring at it. Absolutely fucking not. He wasn't about to humiliate himself like this. Not even for the orphans, street kids, and struggling families. Why couldn't he just read a few stupid stories and call it a day? Babs should have got him a Grinch costume instead. Tim, the little shit, piped up from the sidelines. Fuck off, baby bird, or I'll throw your Nintendo Switch out the window. Jason growled with a sharp smile. Tim opened and closed his mouth like a goldfish, horrified. No, Jason! He whined, and Jason rolled his eyes at his tone. He was tracing the seam of the costume again, contemplating his next move, when Alfred swept into the room. Masters, I shall drive you to the library shortly. As I have business in the city, I trust you're all nearly ready. The butler's sharp eyes ticked over to Jason, and the costume in his hands. Ah, dressing as Santa this year, Master Jason. How gracious of you. I distinctly recall you telling me about attending the library's Christmas festivities in your youth. It's heartwarming to see you taking up the mantle this year. Quite commendable, my boy. Once you're all ready, we'll depart. With that, Alfred swept back out of the room. Jason stood there, teeth clenched, realizing that he'd just lost this round. There was no going back now. Fuck. Don't you dare say anything. He growled at his brothers, before stomping off to change. He wasn't even angry about the situation. Not really. He was just miffed that he'd been outmaneuvered by a butler who might as well be his grandfather. After fussing in front of the mirror for longer than he cared to admit, Jason finally trudged into the hallway. As expected, Dick was already preening in his ridiculous green elf costume, and Tim stood nervously adjusting his red one. Alfred waited patiently nearby. Before Dick could open his mouth, Tim elbowed him hard, earning a yelp. Alfred gave Jason a small, approving smile. You look splendid, Master Jason. Now, shall we? Splendid was not the word Jason would have chosen. The top half of the costume was tight across his chest and shoulders, while the pants were so baggy they needed one of his belts just to stay up. The fake beard and wig itched like hell, and he was already counting the minutes until he could rip them the fuck off. He'd swapped the ridiculous costume shoes for his nicest black combat boots, but that was the only consolation. No one would call this splendid. At least Roy wasn't there to witness this catastrophe. That would be game over. He could kiss his chance with the older man goodbye. The car ride to the library was mercifully short. Dick spent most of it excitedly texting Barbara from the passenger seat, while Tim, sitting beside Jason, fidgeted nervously. "You good?" Jason asked, flicking an unruly strand of fake white hair out of his face. Tim shrugged, chewing on his lips. I don't want to mess up, you know? Jason softened, offering a small smile. "You won't. Just follow mine and Dick's lead, okay?" When they arrived, Jason could see the library was packed from the outside. Memories of coming here with his mom before she died surfaced unbidden. He pushed them down as they made their way in. The minute they entered, the buzz of excited children's voices filled the air. Barbara, smiling brightly from her makeshift stage, waved them over. "It seems you've all been very good this year," she announced. "Thank you for visiting, Santa." She gestured to 3 stools on the stage. Jason barely had time to process before Dick shot him a look, yanking him out of his thoughts. "Good day, my children," Jason said in his best attempt at a jovial Santa voice, waving stiffly as he walked towards the stage. "My elves and I thank you for this, invitation." Dick elbowed him with a grin that screamed, "You're terrible at this," earning a grumbled, "Fuck off, Dick, I mean, ho ho ho," under Jason's breath. Thankfully, Barbara took the reins, explaining the day's schedule, a Q&A, story time, and finally, pictures with the kids. Every child would get a small chocolate treat and a book sponsored by Bruce, plus a Polaroid photo to take home, so that they'd have a picture to remember this day by, no matter their financial situation. The Q&A was awkward, but manageable. The kids asked everything from their favorite color to how Mrs. Claus was holding up with Santa at home. The Mrs. Claus question caught Jason off guard, sending Dick and Tim, and even Barbara, into barely contained laughter as he stumbled through the answer. Despite his fumbling, the kids stayed encouraged and excited. It was a goddamn miracle. Storytime, however, was where Jason found his rhythm. Seeing the wonder in the children's faces as he read was something else. He wouldn't admit it, but he already planned to ask Barbara if he could do this more often. Preferably without the godforsaken costume. The photo session was tedious, but the kids' joy made it worthwhile. Many of them brought drawings or eagerly shared stories about their families and Christmas wishes. Every child got a chance to sit on one of their laps, and the happiness on their faces tugged at something deep in Jason's chest. Almost made him tear up. Almost. By the time the event wrapped up, the kids were reluctant to part ways, but Dick handled it with hugs, Jason offered hair ruffles, and Tim gave fist bumps. Once back in Alfred's car, Jason viciously ripped off the wig and fake beard, sighing in relief. Scratchy demon spawn gone. He'd done his good deed for the next 5 years. If any of his business associates ever found out about this, they'd drag his street cred through the mud. His moment of peace was shattered by Dick's voice from the passenger seat. "I took a picture, and Roy says he loves your look, Jaybird." Jason froze, glaring daggers at Dickhead, the traitorous bastard, winked, far too smug. Snarling, Jason launched himself forward, snatching the phone out of Dick's hands as Alfred shouted for them to behave. He should have stayed dead. Merry Christmas his ass. Snoozed by Fortune. A Batman All Media Types fanfic, rated for general audiences. With additional tags for Tim Drake and Jason Todd are siblings, Tim Drake-centric, Tim Drake is Red Robin, Tired Tim Drake gets a hug, Tim Drake deserves love, Tim Drake deserves happiness, Good sibling Jason Todd is Red Hood, Jason Todd-centric, Jason Todd is so done, Jason Todd deserves happiness, Barbara Gordon is Oracle, Damian Wayne is Robin, Damian Wayne has a heart, Dick Grayson is Nightwing. Dick Grayson is a menace. Bat Family Shenanigans. Alfred Pennyworth is the best. Good Parent Bruce Wayne. Tooth-rotting Fluff. Domestic Fluff. Sleepy Cuddles. Sleepy Boys. Fluff and Crack. Crack Treated Seriously. And inspired by fan art. Part 11 of The Robin Chronicles. Summary. Wait, had he actually fallen asleep? His eyes snapped open just in time to realize Jason was carrying him, his leather jacket now draped over Tim's shoulders, as he strode towards the Batmobile. Jason? Tim yawned, his voice small and embarrassed. What about the stakeout? Jason's voice was soft. The modulator switched off. Don't worry about it, Timmers. We're getting you home. Or, 5 times Jason made sure Tim got sleep. Sometimes accidentally. Feeling my way through the darkness, guided by a beating heart. Wake me up, Avicii. The night was brutal, freezing temperatures, biting wind, and thick clouds blotting out the sky. A stakeout had been scheduled, and, as usual, Bruce had made the executive decision that Tim and Jason were the lucky ones stuck with it. Both of them were pissed. Normally they took turns, and, by that logic, it should have been Dick and Damien's turn. But no, B had sent those two on a last-minute intel-gathering mission instead. So fucking unfair. Which was how Tim ended up in this miserable situation. Jason had met him in the cave an hour earlier for their final briefing, and just as Tim had been about to get on his bike, Jason had decided, completely unilaterally, that they were taking the Batmobile instead. Fine, whatever. But then Jason had also suddenly decided that Tim was a poor, fragile little bird in dire need of extra layers. Before Tim could even open his mouth to protest, Jason had already gone upstairs. When he came back, it was with a black winter jacket and a pair of yellow Converse in hand. Tim took one look and scowled. No, absolutely not. Jason smirked. I can't have you freezing to death on my watch, baby bird. My suit is perfectly insulated, Jay. Jason threw a pointed look at the built-in boots of Tim's Red Robin suit and snorted. You're gonna freeze your toes off, Timberlina. And we can't have that, can we? Tim opened his mouth, ready to fire back, but before he could get a word out, the shoes came flying at his face. He barely managed to catch them before they could smack him square in the nose. If you don't put them on, Jason said smugly, I'll tell B about the time you almost clicked on a phishing link on the Bat computer because you hadn't slept in a week. Tim hissed. You wouldn't. Jason's smirk widened. You really want to test that, Timbuktu? Is getting benched really worth all this? Tim hated that his brother had a point. Letting out the loudest, most obnoxious huff he could muster, he dropped into a chair and yanked the shoes on over his suit's boots. Fuck you, Jason. Jason grinned. I love you too, Timmy. The second Tim stood up, he heard the unmistakable click of a camera shutter. His eyes twitched. Jason had taken a picture. Not dignifying it with a response, Tim stomped towards the Batmobile, yanking the passenger door open and buckling up with all the dramatics of a petulant child. Let Jason feel his rage. That bastard. Jason slid into the driver's seat a moment later and immediately shoved the jacket into Tim's lap, his silent way of telling him to put it on as soon as they got out of the car. The ride was mostly silent, save for some occasional small talk, once Tim decided he might as well enjoy his brother's company instead of wasting the next few hours being petty. When they arrived at their stakeout location, Tim waited until Jason had walked a few paces ahead before ditching the jacket. He refused to be babied by Jason, of all people. Jason didn't notice until they were both in position. Tim shot him a smug smirk. Take that. Jason just shook his head. Within the first few minutes, Tim had wrapped his cape tightly around himself, partially for warmth, but mostly to hide the god-awful canary yellow shoes he had been forced to wear. Whoever invented stakeouts was a fucking sadist. Within an hour, he was bored enough to mentally craft an acronym for what stakeout stood for. Soul-crushing, tedious, agonizing, knee-numbing, exhausting, oppressive, unending torture. Which was exactly what it was. By hour 3, the cold had started to win. Despite his best efforts, Tim's body betrayed him. His eyes were getting droopier by the second, his limbs felt heavy, and at some point, he must have nodded off completely. Because the next thing he knew, he was being lifted off the ground. A groggy blink, and he cracked one eye open, squinting blearily at the offending hands. Who the hell was... Wait, had he actually fallen asleep? His eyes snapped open, just in time to realize Jason was carrying him, his leather jacket now draped over Tim's shoulders as he strode towards the Batmobile. Jason? Tim yawned, his voice small and embarrassed. What about the stakeout? Jason's voice was soft, the modulator switched off. Don't worry about it, Timmers. We're getting you home. Big Brother was handling it. Tim felt himself slipping away again. But Bruce... Apparently, he'd spoken aloud, because Jason let out a low chuckle. Don't worry about the big bad bat, baby bird. I'll deal with him. Just go to sleep. That was all the reassurance he needed. Tim let out a small, content hum, before drifting off once again. 5 more minutes. That was all Tim needed to finally finish this hell of a case. Oh, who was he kidding? 3 days ago, he confidently told Bruce he'd be done by midnight. Yesterday... Wait, was it yesterday? He'd told Dick he'd be done in an hour. Who cares? Tim spun the chair in front of the Batcomputer to the side and gleefully set his now empty mug of coffee under the coffee machine he'd snuck into the cave, directly against Bruce, Dick, and Alfie's orders. They should just consider it his teenage rebellion phase, and be grateful for the case he was about to solve. Tim reasoned with a shrug. This all started 4 days ago, when he had an epiphany at lunch. The case, a string of seemingly unconnected murders with no clear motive, had been bugging him for days. Obsessed, he dragged along with Bruce to every interrogation and crime scene. Seeing his determination, B had finally handed it over to him. Pretty sure the old man regretted that now. Tim had only left the cave once, briefly, to shower and change after Bruce's first check-in. Since then, he'd been glued to the Batcomputer. This case had so many twists and turns, it felt like a bad Wattpad detective story, where an 11-year-old author was making things up as they went. Not that Tim had any experience with that. No! But now, he was close. So fucking close. He'd finally figured out the motive. He just needed to connect it to the evidence and security footage. Easy, just tedious and time-consuming. Grabbing his freshly brewed coffee, Tim leaned back in his chair. Just as he lifted the mug to take a sip, someone snatched it right out of his hands. Tim blinked at his now empty hand, then at his other hand, then at the spot where he always placed his coffee, then at the machine. Huh? Jesus. You are really fucking sleep-deprived, aren't you? A voice chuckled behind him. Tim whirled around so fast he nearly fell out of his chair. Jason stood there, smirking, casually holding his mug. Oh, the mug. There it was. Stretching out his arms, Tim reached for it. Gimme. Jason, being the absolute devil incarnate, simply lifted the mug out of reach, before setting it on the desk behind him. Dickhead wasn't kidding when he said you didn't even notice him checking in a few hours ago. Jason shook his head. Oh well, guess we're doing this my way. Before Tim could react, Jason hoisted him into a fireman's carry. Weakly, Tim squirmed, trying to fight back. But Jason was both stronger and not running purely on caffeine and spite. Jason, he whined, wiggling to break free. Sorry, Timmy. No more Batcomputer for you. Dick's orders. Jason's smirk was audible in his voice. You're a dick. Jason snorted, but didn't respond, carrying him upstairs like it was nothing. Tim's blackout curtains were already half drawn, clearly prepped in advance. Jason set him down gently on the bed, before turning to Tim's closet to grab pajamas. By the time he turned back, Tim was already half asleep. "Oh, no, Tim Tam. You can't sleep in those clothes." Tim cracked one eye open and let out a yawn. Jason sighed. "The shit I do for you bastards," he muttered, carefully pulling off Tim's shoes. "You're lucky you're cute." "You're just a softie," Tim mumbled softly, as Jason tugged off his clothes and replaced them with the pajamas. Red Hood-themed ones, of course. After tucking him in, Jason went to shut the curtains fully. "Good night, Timmy." "Night, Jay." And with that, Tim was out. Tonight's patrol had been a fucking mess. First, Dick had twisted his ankle, which sent Damien into a full-blown panic because how dare the wall harm his precious Grayson? Then, Bruce had been called away by the commish over a double homicide, with possible ties to one of the trafficking rings they'd been investigating lately, which was already bad enough because, well, drugs were shit. And lastly, it had started pouring rain. The only good thing was that Tim and Jason had been near one of Jason's safe houses. Not his best one, but a roof over their heads nonetheless. Low-key, and very secretly, Tim was really proud of his older brother. In the past few years, Jason hadn't needed to use his dozen or so safe houses anymore, meaning he felt comfortable enough with the Bat family to let them know he was either at the manor or his apartment. Years ago, they wouldn't have even dared to hope for that. Of course, that also meant most of Jason's safe houses were now bare bones at best. The one they were in now didn't even have a bed frame anymore. With the distinct lack of groceries and furniture, Jason had swiftly decided for both of them that they'd be heading back to the manor for the night. Absolutely not because he wanted to check on their eldest brother. No, of course not. Looking around the empty space, Tim had to fight the urge to scratch his nose, or sneeze, at all the dust. Out of seemingly nowhere, Jason pulled a duffel bag full of various clothes from all Bat family members, which was something Tim hadn't even known existed. It was really cute, and showed just how far his brother had come. They all knew Jason was secretly the biggest mother hen in the family. Tim decided against calling him out on it. Jason would just get defensive, and Tim wasn't about to make him feel bad for being thoughtful. Jason tossed him a pair of sneakers, a hoodie, and jeans. When Tim just stared at him in confusion, Jason shrugged. "What? It's cold and wet out," he said, before turning and swapping his own combat boots for Converse. His helmet had already been dumped into the duffel bag a few minutes earlier. Tim slowly followed his example, and when he turned back, Jason held something out to him. "A skateboard? Look what I found, baby bird. No clue why I even have it. So, have fun." Practically squealing in delight, Tim snatched the skateboard, inspecting it, and then hugged his brother tightly. "It's almost brand new, Jay. This is awesome. Thank you." Jason chuckled, hugging him back before stepping away to zip up the duffel bag. "How do you feel about taking the subway to Bristol? I'll call Alfred to meet us at the station. At this hour, it's practically empty anyway. Beats getting soaked on one of the cycles I keep in this building's garage." Tim tilted his head in thought, before slowly nodding. He'd never taken the subway while on patrol before, unless a rogue had hijacked it. But hey, he was all for new experiences. The walk there was short, with Tim trying out his new skateboard. Without immediately falling on his face, "Thank you very much." He was pretty sure Jason had secretly recorded the whole thing. That traitor. As Jason had predicted, the subway station was completely empty, and the train they boarded was too. Tim watched his brother send a quick message to Alfie before settling into the seat beside him. The ride would only take 20 minutes, but 5 minutes in, Tim heard a quiet snore from Jason. Determined to stay awake and keep watch, Tim started counting all the seats in the carriage before switching to absent-mindedly fiddling with his bow staff. Time passed slowly. Everything became a little blurry. Then, suddenly, Jason was shaking him awake. "Come on, baby bird. We have to get off now, or we'll miss our stop." Crap. He had fallen asleep too. His eyes met Jason's, and in that moment, a secret promise was made. Nobody tells anyone. And then the comm line crackled to life. Bab's voice came through, crackling in delight. "Bring some of Alfred's cookies this week, and this stays between the three of us." She sing-songed smugly. Fuck Oracle and her cameras. Yes, Barbie, fuck off. Jason grumbled as they stepped off the train. "I'll bring them Thursday when I come to read to the kids at the library." The comm line went silent again, and Tim had to hide his grin. God, he loved his family. Tim had been feeling jumpy this whole afternoon, and it was annoying the fuck out of him. It had started out as a beautiful Sunday, sunny for once in what seemed to be an eternally raining Gotham. Much to Alfred's delight, Tim had started his day, well, midday, because no vigilante voluntarily left their bed before lunch after a whole night of patrol, with only 2 cups of coffee instead of the usual 5 to 7. After eating lunch with the whole family, he joined Dick for their weekly gymnastics session, along with anyone else who was willing to take part. And, at last, he'd done an hour of paperwork for WE. That was it. Crazy, right? Well, as much as he would have wanted to do more, Bruce had, with Barbara's help, installed a timer on his work computer to force him to use his weekends for something other than work. Which was honestly just rude, but he knew they meant well, so he decided to tolerate it. For now. This left him with a bunch of free time, though, and Tim had no idea what to do. He wasn't really feeling up for a photography session, and Alfred would have his head if he even dared to skateboard inside the manor. For a while, he had settled on playing video games, but that had grown old really quickly. Wandering through the manor halls, Tim pursed his lips in thought. Going to the cave would start another world war, because Damie and Bruce were having a father-son session in there. And holy fuck, those were the most important thing in his little brother's life, or so Damien let it seem. Anyone who dared to enter during their session would receive threats ranging from broken bones, scooped-out organs, and castration, to even death. Not that Tim could honestly blame the little guy. Tim himself was crazy protective of his monthly day with Bruce, where he took the man to any convention he deemed interesting for both of them. As he walked into the main living room, he spied Jason on the couch with his feet kicked up, staring at his phone, probably texting Roy, who had been in Star City the past week. His brother was wearing a Wonder Woman hoodie. Not just a random one. No, he was wearing the Wonder Woman hoodie Diana herself had given him a few years ago for Christmas, after finding out how big of a fan Jason was. Touching that hoodie would be a death sentence. Tim loved snatching hoodies, sweaters, shirts, any clothing really, out of his family's closets. It made him feel more connected to them, but even he didn't dare to touch this hoodie. After all, boundaries were to be respected, and he had a much better second option anyway. With a devious grin on his face, he kneeled next to Jason on the couch. Jason immediately looked up with a questioning glance. Before his brother could even open his mouth, Tim crawled under the hoodie. "What the fuck, Timmers?" Jason asked, more in confusion than annoyance. Tim only grinned at Jason as he poked his head out of the hoodie and laid it against his brother's neck. Completely comfortable against Jason and inside the hoodie, Tim let out a content sigh. He had managed to snatch the hoodie without getting killed, and sharing was caring. Jason let out a surprised bark of laughter before settling his phone down next to him on the couch. "You sneaky little brat." In response, Tim puffed out a breath and relaxed against his brother. Yeah, this is what he needed. As Jason's arms wrapped around him over the soft fabric of the hoodie, Tim's eyes slowly slipped shut. The only evidence of this ever happening was the picture of the two of them napping this way on Alfred's bedroom wall. Patrol had been mild but long last night. Too long, honestly. It just wouldn't fucking stop, which led to them all being out until early morning. Thank God it was the weekend, or else they would have all been screwed. As they lounged around that evening, none of them could keep their eyes open. Jason had made sure that Tim had been the first one to cave in. It had started with them all watching a movie. Damien and Dick were goofing around on the ground. Or, rather, Dick was annoying Damien. Tim had his feet on Jason's lap, while half laying down on the couch. Periodically, his brother would massage his legs, which didn't help with his sleepiness. The movie they were watching was honestly the most boring shit Tim had ever seen. Dick had picked it blindly off one of the bajillion streaming services they had, and while they were all about to fall asleep because of its lack of action or interesting plot, nobody made a move to turn it off. All of them were, frankly, too lazy to get up and grab the remote, so they just suffered instead. A while went by, and Tim slowly but surely nodded off, much to Jason's delight. The next time Tim cracked an eye open, it was to Dick standing over him, a phone right in his face. "What the fuck, Dick?" he grumbled sleepily. "Shh, go back to sleep, baby bird. Little Wing's asleep too," Dick assured him with an easygoing grin. Shrugging to himself, he closed his eyes again and briefly felt another body snuggle up to him. From the perfume, he guessed it had to be the demon brat. Sometime later, how long, Tim had no idea, he heard Jay swearing at Dick and telling their eldest brother to get his fat ass off his back. Tim had to snort, but ultimately decided that sleep was more important. Hours later, when Bruce came to get them for patrol, he found them all in a pile on the couch. It was safe to say that pictures were taken. And even if Bruce denied having them, Tim was darn sure he had seen one as Bee's background on one of his computers. Their father was so sappy. Notes. Once again, all credit for the fan art and inspiration goes to Avi at DisasterTwins9000. I love you so much, girl. Heart. If you enjoyed this work, don't hesitate to comment. Come hang out with me on Tumblr. And thank you so much for reading, and have a wonderful day. If you enjoyed this work, you can go down to the description below and follow the link to give the author kudos and comments, etc. If you enjoyed this reading, you can subscribe if you want. I post every Thursday. If you have a fic you would like me to read, you can leave that in the comments below, and I will try to get permission to podfic it. Have a great day.